A dog's unwavering loyalty and devotion to his handler transcended life itself, leaving everyone in awe when they discovered why he remained by his owner's grave day and night. While funerals are a time of sorrow for those who lose loved ones, the animals left behind are often forgotten. Typically, these pets are taken in by relatives or given to a shelter to find a new home. However, the dog in this story did something truly extraordinary. Sergeant, a German Shepherd, was a loving and friendly dog who had a special place in the hearts of everyone he met. He started his career as a police dog where he was partnered with Ian, a police officer. At the time they first met, Ian had only been a police officer for a couple of years, but he had always dreamed of working in the canine department. When he was paired with Sergeant, he was overjoyed. The bond between the two was instant, and they quickly became a highly effective team, trained to respond to any situation that came their way. As time passed, their connection deepened, and Sergeant eventually came to live with Ian, strengthening their bond even further. The two did everything together. From relaxing on the sofa to long walks in the park, they were inseparable. Off-duty, Sergeant loved to interact with people they met during their walks, always cheerful and friendly. One day, while Ian and Sergeant were in their patrol car, a robbery call came through over the radio. Ian immediately started the car and drove toward the scene with sirens blaring. The suspects, two men attempting to rob a nearby house, had been spotted by the homeowner. When Ian arrived, he saw the two criminals fleeing on foot. Determined to catch them, Ian chased after the suspects. But as he was about to catch up, the men ran into the woods. Since Ian had been the first to arrive, he didn't have backup, only Sergeant barking anxiously from the back seat. Ian knew he should wait for backup, especially since he didn't know if the criminals were armed. However, not wanting to let the men escape, Ian made the brave decision to pursue them into the woods. Following Sergeant, who had picked up their scent, Ian ran deeper into the dense trees. Soon, he heard one of the men muttering ahead. With his gun drawn, Ian moved cautiously, telling Sergeant to stay behind for safety. But as Ian entered a clearing, he realized there was only one man there. Before he could look around for the second suspect, a sharp pain struck his side. The second man had ambushed him and stabbed him with a knife. Sensing Ian's distress, Sergeant immediately rushed to his handler's side, attacking the man who had injured Ian. The dog bit down hard, refusing to release his grip, despite the criminal's desperate attempts to break free. The second suspect attempted to intervene, managing to pry Sergeant off with a large branch. Sergeant was injured in the struggle, but the criminals managed to escape into the woods, vanishing just as backup police officers arrived at the scene. Though Ian was gravely injured, Sergeant stayed by his side, barking loudly to guide the officers to their location. Unfortunately, Ian's injuries were too severe, and he passed away. The loss devastated Sergeant, who fell into a deep depression. Unable to cope, he became unfit for duty and was placed with Ian's family, where he could be surrounded by familiar faces in his final years. Days later, Ian was laid to rest. Sergeant, along with Ian's family and police colleagues, attended the funeral. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, Sergeant began to bark and whine, as if calling out for his beloved owner to rise and give him one more cuddle. But it was not meant to be. When the funeral ended, Ian's wife, Shelley, noticed that Sergeant was missing. She went in search of him and found him lying next to Ian's grave. Shelley tried to lead Sergeant away, but nothing she did could move him. When she reached for his collar, Sergeant growled in protest, his grief-stricken loyalty clear. Not knowing how to comfort him, Shelley left Sergeant by the grave, planning to return the next day. However, the next day, Sergeant refused to leave, and over the following days, he steadfastly remained by his master's grave. Shelley made sure to bring him food and water twice a day, but Sergeant never budged from his vigil. Then, one day, as Sergeant guarded Ian's resting place, one of Ian's police friends, Sean, approached to leave flowers and food for the grieving dog. As Sean stood by Ian's grave, Sergeant suddenly began to growl, a warning that something was amiss. The dog stood up, moved away from the grave, and began to move toward the street, drawn by voices in the distance. Curious, Sean followed the dog, only to see the two men who had attacked Ian and Sargent. Recognizing them, Sargent immediately sprang into action, biting one of the criminals in the leg. The man screamed in terror, falling to the ground as Sargent held him in place, threatening to bite his neck. The second criminal tried to flee, but Sean was quick to subdue him, handcuffing him until backup arrived. The criminals were arrested and taken into custody while Sargent returned to Ian's grave. He gave one final whine before walking away to join Sean. It seemed that Sargent had fulfilled his promise to bring the men to justice for taking Ian's life. With the criminals safely behind bars, Sargent went on to live with Shelley, visiting Ian's grave occasionally but no longer staying there day and night. Thanks to the courage and loyalty of this remarkable dog, two dangerous criminals were taken off the streets and Ian could finally rest in peace.